This is Jordan Edwards, and this is the Business Jiu-Jitsu Podcast. Good afternoon, Pete Roberts here on the Business Jiu-Jitsu Podcast. I was just telling Pete off air that when I was first thinking about this project, long before I was thinking about turning this into a podcast, and I'm just doing book research, I made a short list of all the people I wanted to talk to in the industry, in the jiu-jitsu industry, and Pete's name was right at the top of the list. So Pete, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Absolutely, man. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Let me just give a little introduction on who you are. Pete is the owner and founder of Origin. It's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu apparel, and it's grown into so much more, to durable goods, supplements, energy drinks. You're Jocko Willing's business partner on his Jocko energy drink. And from the time that I've been following you, I remember, and I don't know exactly how long ago this was, but I remember at some point you building a factory, and it was pretty small. And I can't even imagine how many times you've outgrown that first facility.
Yeah, well, that's what turned me absolutely almost completely gray at a young age was building that factory. So I think my superpower of ADHD and just being naive and not taking no for an answer probably got me through it. I wouldn't recommend cutting down a forest and sawing out some pine trees and building a timber frame factory. But I guess I like to do things the hard way.
And of course, we're talking about your factory up in Maine. Are you originally from Maine?
No, I'm a masshole, man. I'm originally from Massachusetts. Moved up here when I was a young kid, maybe 8 years old. I'll never be a true Mainer, as my father-in-law says to me. You're still from Massachusetts, don't you forget that. But it is home. Maine is home. I've been here for a long time, and not planning on leaving anytime soon.
Yeah. Where in Massachusetts?
I was born in Gloucester.
Oh, sure.
And North Shore kid.
Mm-hmm.
So the Ipswich area, and
Yeah.
all my family's down there. Big Greek family. So they're
okay.
all business folk down in Massachusetts.
Yeah, I love Greek. Is Greek heritage still part of your life? Is your wife Greek? Are you in the Greek community?
She, my papu said before he passed that my wife was an honorary Greek because of her cooking. She can cook spanakopita, she can cook domadas, she can cook all sorts of good Greek dishes. So she's honorary, but now she's very, very French.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Very, very cool. I bring up New England because, your business is like, you've done something that it could give me chills. I mean, anybody who knows the history of New England knows that it was the center of commerce for the whole world for 150 years. And the timber industry, the mill industry. If you drive along the roads of New England, you see these skeletons and you think like this was commerce, this was global industry, and then it just died. And then here you come along and you're like, you have the balls to think that you're going to start American industry all over again, and then you do it. I mean, it's just crazy. It's crazy to think that you could do that. I mean, what inspired you to say, I'm going to do that?
I think I just simply asked the question, like, why not? And I was naive enough to think I could have some sort of impact on it. One thing I've always been really good at, and I think it's maybe because of my personality profile, is piecing together like the why. You know what I mean? Like, number one, why did industry leave? And was it the corporate raiders? Was it lazy employees? Was it a mixture of both? Was it like runaway capitalism? But asking that why question, and then piecing together the onset of kind of like this digital age, right? Where we see more kids on phones and screen-based media. And I just felt like this next generation, they've never seen Made in America. And our generation, how I kind of positioned it was, let me put it this way. When I was building our first factory, my papu passed away. And I was reminiscing a lot about him working in the tanneries at 8 years old, pulling tacks out of hides by hand at the tannery. And as I was building this factory and thinking about this, I was like, this is going to be missed. He when he talked about his time working in the factories, he was really proud of it, even though it was hard work, and he bled before he went to school between his fingers by pulling these tacks out. They had a tool to do it. It was piecework. He figured he could pull more out, put them in between the fingers and just rip them out. So he was proud of this, and of course the factories, have improved over the years. And I saw this kind of hole where the greatest generation, they're all passing away. Like the last of the greatest generation, that World War II generation, and our grandparents fighting in that war, in them, their stories are the only thing left behind. Then I saw this next generation, because I'm a Gen Xer. My kids will never know those stories like I did firsthand. And I felt like these communities that greatest generation were part of, in these mills, they were the melting pot where all these immigrants came in and they melted together to build these products. And I just saw something within these three kind of intangibles, and it was more of like a something's going to be missing. And I think it's that made in America. I think it's that thing you can pick up and touch and smell and say, hey, somebody made this in this town in Farmington, Maine. Somebody made this in Lowell, Massachusetts. Somebody made this in Dallas, Texas. I can, like that's going to be missing, not knowing who the makers are. This other movement with kind of keeping it local and green, which has been widely, kind of spread when it comes to like food or like beef, or like that type of thing. That also I thought could be applied to this made in America. Like made in America just isn't good for our communities, and it's not just good for, for kind of rebuilding our infrastructure in the US, but it also is local. So it appeals to everybody, there's really an opportunity here to capitalize on. And I figured I coined this term reshoring capitalism. So I figured if runaway capitalism could take it away, why can't reshoring capitalism bring it all back?
Sure.
And then, to make a long story longer, then I started thinking about the idea of using social media to tell that story. And I've been doing this for the past decade. Like if I can create this transparent origin factory blockchain where from seed to shelf, dirt to shirt, field to finish, where your product's coming from. If you can share that story of building a factory and building a company and building a brand, in this very transparent, let's call it factory blockchain, that's special. And you can build a relationship with a consumer, not just me as a business owner, but I'm talking about the factory worker, the craftsman, the craftswomen, who at the end of the day, they turn around and say, I built that. That thing goes to a customer. And then all of a sudden the customer posts this thing on social media and they're like, thank you. Well, the person who built it can respond directly and say, you're welcome. And so you get that second level of fulfillment. And then you just create this kind of compounding connection to the customer that's super undeniable and never been done before at the level that I'm trying to do it. Um, so that's kind of like what I saw early on, was this opportunity. And I knew building that first factory, and again, I didn't have two nickels to rub together, a bucket to piss in. So I saw this opportunity really with nothing except an idea, and got friends and family together to help me clear this little forest up in the woods. And like I said, we had all these timbers sawn out, and we erected this like a barn raising. We found some old L bean sewing machines, that were from the 40s, and got a generator going and started making stuff as a proof of concept. And you had to be able to make it profitable.
Yeah.
You
Wait.
had to
Let
be
me
able to take.
let me slow you down there for a second.
Yeah.
I have to unpack a couple of the things you said before we
Sure.
move on.
Yeah, I'll just keep going, man. You got to stop
Yeah,
me.
a few things to unpack there. First and foremost, I want to go back all the way to the beginning of what you were just talking about and talk about the great generation. That just hit a big nerve with me because I lost my grandfather this past Sunday, 93 years old, World War II. Thank you very much. World War II veteran, entrepreneur like you,
Yep.
like me, with nothing, came out of World War II, lived in a tenement on the Upper West Side of New York with my grandmother. They lived in a single room. and the whole floor shared a bathroom. Now I'm telling this story a couple months ago, and he corrects me. He said, we didn't share a bathroom. We shared 2 bathrooms. He was so proud of the fact that they had 2. But that generation, I just don't think there's ever going to be a generation like it.
There's not. And like the fact that you just told me that story with such conviction and passion means that it sets somewhere deep, like in your soul. Right. And if Origin can make a connection to that past through a product that we've built, if we can kind of intertwine those stories, you have something, you're buying something that you believe in, because your grandfather, my grandfather, grandmothers, great uncles, they were all part of the greatest generation, and I think just so much work ethic and grit and resolve came out of that generation, like what they were able to do. So I'll never be able to tell it to my kids. You'll never be able to tell it to your kids. It's too detached. Like, I can tell them the stories, but they're never going to feel it. But they can feel something different. You know what I mean? It's still, they're all about saving the world. And, my daughter's about, saving the dolphins, and, and cutting down on fossil fuels and keeping it green and keeping it local, and there's a story to be told, which these two things work in synergy. And if you can capture it, package it, you've got something very different and very unique. And that's what I've been trying to do.
Well, I am optimistic on the next generation, and I feel like the next generation kind of never really cares about the one before them, right? They're like, you think about it as this relates to music. You're never going to convince a teenager right now that Jimi Hendrix is more relevant to them than God, whoever it is, that they like. But let me go back to also what you were just discussing, and you started to touch on your social media presence and you documenting building your first factory, and that's kind of where I got turned on to you, like at this point where you were starting this company and making gis and finding equipment from the 70s in barns up in New England, and spinning cotton in the United States for the first time again. I mean, I just don't think that can be understated. As my people would say, the chutzpah that you had to go and say, I'm going to revive a whole industry. And here we are, I guess, close to 10 years later. And not only have you done that, but you've been expanding all over the East Coast and growing factories and building more factories, and the company's growing. How big is your company now in terms of people?
Yeah, we are, and my people would call it the philotimo too, the Greek. We're 210 people now, spread over 5 locations, about 200,000 square feet in 2 states. So we acquired another plant in North Carolina, and I think within the next few years it'll be 1,000 people in 4 states. And as we buy up, not from a corporate raider perspective, but from a reshoring capitalism perspective, as we buy up these mills and factories, we're going to create and protect what we're building, not sell it away, for greed, for the almighty dollar. So,
well, you've been doing that and documenting it, and you have like your own TV show. I mean, do you have ever thought about it like that? Like, how intentional is it? Are you authentically documenting your life, or are you like thinking about the fact that you have created a very compelling content series, and people are bought in?
Yeah, I document. I always knew the power of like social media and YouTube, and how to leverage that. And I also, understand the power of like really authentic stories, like unscripted, really authentic and transparent, storytelling. And I'm a storyteller at heart. So I just thought, like, if I could just do what I do and bring people into my world, I think I have fun doing it. You know, it puts a smile on my face. It gets me up early in the morning. Like other people, I think they'll appreciate it too. So it was never like we don't like script anything, but like I know that in 10 years they're going to be teaching the origin story in colleges and universities. You know, I see business, you know, professors like referring to videos on YouTube. Like, look at they were going to make a pair of boots. Here's how they started. They're going to start this from scratch. They have no machinery. They have two people. They have a sketch on a piece of paper, and you're going to be able to watch this whole thing come to life into a you know a massive business and filling a factory, and you're going to be able to learn about the mistakes along the way because I talk about those things. And so that's very like I do that purposefully. You know what I mean? Because I think what we're doing now is more powerful in a decade. I don't even think it's close to powerful now. I think it's more powerful when 90 million people know, you know, not when 5 million people know.
Yeah.
So, you know, in conjunction with that, we've been working on a documentary over the past 3 years. We lost last year that we're talking with Amazon and right now, hopefully it'll go on Netflix. But once that goes on air, it's kind of, it's like, it's just like the thing that is going to propel us into the hearts and minds of not only 300 million Americans, but folks around the world, because a lot of folks have been affected by the same things we have in America. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of parallels, but I can't share too much more than that. But it's
That's okay.
intentional. It's
Well,
definitely intentional.
now I'm going off script a little bit from some of the things I wanted to get at, but you know, your business partner Jocko Willink is, you know, one of my heroes.
Yeah.
He's a lot of guys' hero, and we're all just waiting for the moment that he's going to step up and lead this country and become our next president.
Yeah.
God willing. Like I
Yeah.
swear, I swear to God, I dream about that. I hope that doesn't make me a weirdo, but I really do. And now I'm understanding who his commerce secretary is going to be. You need to come, you need to step up and be in his cabinet. And
That'd be me.
I say that with all sincerity. You probably don't feel the call, but anyway, that's off script. I really am interested in what you were just describing, and my book is that's what I want to document. I really do connect with how you've marketed, built, and most importantly, you've gotten us so bought in on following you in the story. And as it connects to the story that I'm writing in this book on business jiu-jitsu, I mean, that you're in the business of jiu-jitsu and you're in business. It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think jiu-jitsu, without jiu-jitsu, I wouldn't have been able to achieve, you know, I guess what I have been able to with, you know, and it's not me, it's the team, but I mean, casting that wider vision and using jujitsu to think around and work around that vision versus like not having jujitsu. Like jujitsu is like it's just an incredible thing to have in your life because it literally changes the way you think. You know what I mean? It changes the way you think. And I basically have taken jujitsu and applied it to business. As far as manufacturing, I didn't even know what lean manufacturing was when we started. I knew jujitsu, and I said, okay, how can we be more efficient? You know, and how can we cut down the time in the line? And I didn't even know what lean was, so I just decided to apply jujitsu to manufacturing. Come to find out, there's this thing called lean manufacturing, which is basically jujitsu for manufacturing. So,
Yeah.
you know, I thought a lot about that and used jujitsu in all aspects of business leadership, leading teams, getting the best out of teams, motivating teams, all that stuff. So it's
What's your
powerful.
jiu-jitsu origin story? Where did you start jiu-jitsu? How did you find it?
Yeah, I mean, I started here in Farmington with a local like purple belt, and then I started training. I think I was a blue belt. There was a guy who was from Brazil named Alexei Cruz, and he was De La Riva's first black belt.
Mm-hmm.
So he had moved to Maine for a random reason. Um, his name's Alexei Cruz, um, and I went and started training under him, and also another guy did Deco, Andre Almeida, and they were both Carlson guys. So they learned from Ricardo Laborio and Ricardo De La Riva at Carlson's Academy, in Brazil. And there were some other folks in Maine that were training, another friend, Aaron Blake, and there was a few other guys in the area that were training jiu-jitsu, but I was super into competition. So I kind of sought out like these really high level guys who were building like competition teams. And I used to travel, like I drive 5 hours, train for an hour, drive 5 hours home, and then drive 6 hours, train for an hour, drive 6 hours home. Because in Maine we had like less than 5 black belts, maybe 3 black belts,
Yeah.
and no one really competing at a super high level. But
Where were you driving to the Boston area?
Yeah, I drive to Boston, and then I drive to Connecticut to trade with a guy named Formiga, Rafael Barbosa. And we'd get like teams, like different folks together from around New England, and we'd all kind of descend and train and kick the snot out of each other and then drive home. So I competed right up until 2012. So it was fun, man. Competition was fun, but I knew that in order to build Origin, I'd have to give it up because I couldn't really serve two masters because they both take the same amount of time. Being a high level competitor takes as much time as building a business. So it's all your brain can really have the capacity to think about, you know? So, so that's my origin is through, Carlson, Laborio, De La Hiva.
Who ended up giving you your black belt?
Deco and Alexei, get together, gave me my black belt. And that was almost 10 years ago now.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Through my journey with jiu-jitsu, every night when we would finish training and my sensei, Nardu Debra, who's a black belt under John Danaher and Henzo Gracie, he would give a mat chat. He would talk to us. He would lecture us about the principles of martial arts, Budo, problem solving, competition. And I was never going to be a high level competitor of any kind. But when he would talk to me about those principles, I would say, it's almost as if he's talking to me about my business. It's like, that's the problem that I was facing today in business. And so many different aspects and so many metaphorical comparisons, whether it was dealing with pressure or, like you said, problem solving under pressure. I started to draw these parallels, and jiu-jitsu for me started to become this tremendous outlet for just all types of problem solving and feeling like I can get out of any problem, no matter how much pressure is on me.
100%.
And then so all these guys in the dojo, they would come up to me and they'd ask me questions about business. They would want to start a little t-shirt business. They would want to buy and flip a home. They'd want to do some kind of buy a 2-plex or a 4-plex. And so they would come to me and ask me these business questions, and I would start to explain to them what they needed to do through the lens of jiu-jitsu. It's like, well, how to solve this problem in jiu-jitsu. It's kind of the same thing. And that was where this book came about. And then I saw you on the internet, on Instagram, documenting your whole life of building these facilities and uncovering this thing. I was like, wow, this is just so amazing that he's reviving a whole industry. Now, I do a whole lot of business up in Springfield, Massachusetts, and Springfield, Western Massachusetts City, all these old, beautiful buildings. Yes. And at one time they were grand, built in a style that they just don't build in anymore. And we've had to bring those buildings back to life. And so while you were doing that, you were a big influence for me of like, we can do this. Like we can do it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You can do it. I mean, it's a war of attrition for sure, but it is possible. And Massachusetts kind of like the original melting pot, Rhode Island and Massachusetts. I think it was the Lowell Mill. My great grandmother, my great yaya, when she immigrated from Greece, she worked at the Lowell spinning mills. She was like a Lowell Mill girl. There's kind of a story behind that. But I think that was George Washington after we separated, and we stole the knowledge. There's a cool little story. So there's this guy, Samuel Slater, because there was an industrial revolution in Europe at first before we had it in the U.S. and they weren't allowed to give the Americans the knowledge. So we were shipping all of our raws over to Europe and England and all the cotton and everything. And then somebody came over. They had memorized a spinning machine that they invented over there. They brought the knowledge over. His name is Samuel Slater, and of course he's like an American hero, but they call him Slater the Trader over there
Hmm.
because he was a trader. He took the knowledge and he gave it to the Americans, and they took that one thing that he stole, textile espionage, and then we started to use that to build on, and that really started kind of the industrial revolution, let's say.
Hmm.
And this mill in Lowell, Mass was like the first big mill in Washington came and visited it. Kind of like it was kind of key to the future of America, this Lowell mill in Lowell, Massachusetts, you know.
Yeah.
And then we started replicating those factories, kind of replicating them, finding the powerful rivers, using river power. I say in Lewiston, Maine, where we pulled our loom out of, that was like one of the first mills in Maine, the Bates Mill. I tell people there's enough granite in the canal system they built just to move the water around. There's enough granite to build another Great Pyramid of Egypt. And they did that shit with, horses and donkeys and,
It's crazy.
levers and pulleys, So like it may not be a pyramid, but dang, that canal system is freaking ridiculous. So
Yeah.
they, those folks, like when I just think about that, I reflect on that. I'm like, yippity skippity. We sought out some timbers and built a factory. It's like, it's not that big of a deal. I get it because it hasn't been done for so long, but the shit that those folks did with nothing, you know, like like with nothing, pulleys and levers and horses and donkeys.
Yeah.
Like we've got the internet, we've got, power tools and chainsaws and all sorts of cool shit to use. So
Yeah.
um so pretty much no factor on my end. Like yeah, cool.
Yeah. Well, what's hard is even though you make little of it because we have so much more, China and in the case of our industry in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and fight sports, Pakistan, they've built such a deep moat around the industry, around the
Yeah.
equipment, the skills, the knowledge base, the raw materials. It's hard to source even if you want to do what you did. That's one of the things that's so inspiring to me about you deciding to kickstart this industry. Is like, even if you want, like, I make clothes, but almost everything I do exclusively is in China or done in Los Angeles. And there's so few things you can get done at scale here,
Yeah.
like, because
It's
even if you want raw materials, the raw materials are over in China. And
yeah.
like I said, the skill and the knowledge. When you were talking about Slater the Trader, I was thinking, like, at the time that was like somebody stealing an iPhone patent.
Yeah,
It's like,
it
right.
was.
That was the newest high tech industry back then. That was like right when the world was about to change for the Industrial Revolution, and
Yeah.
all of these factories. Those people who aren't from New England or haven't driven through New England are not going to be able to appreciate what it's like to drive along, the Connecticut River and just see like these
Yeah.
old factories that are dilapidated in some cases. Now they're actually bringing them back as like loft apartments in many
Yeah.
places, but just so cool. One thing I wanted to touch on with you is your immersion camps.
Yeah.
This just another way of bringing people into the brand. And where did that come about? Was that something you had been doing,
Yeah.
or
So
did
we, as another way of showing people what we were doing up in Maine, we decided to have this jujitsu immersion camp. And a lot of folks don't realize, like, those immersion camps actually built Origin. Like the money from those camps, like those first few camps, we like dumped back in. I paid like $5,000 cash for like the concrete, and $3,000 cash for the embroidery machine. So we like negotiated all these cash deals. And the immersion camp funded all of that. But the idea for the immersion camp was to get more people kind of more embedded in our culture, like the origin culture. And the culture was really the people who were involved. Like my jujitsu family, like my instructor Tadeko, he's also my business partner. He was my first business partner. He's the first one that said, I believe in what you're doing. Here's $10,000 to help make it happen. So I wanted people to feel that Jiu-Jitsu, kind of family type atmosphere, and understand that Origin had a special culture about it. And if you could come to the camp, you could experience that culture. And while you're there, we're gonna bring you inside the factory, and we're gonna and I guess I would say I'm gonna cast this wide vision. And if I cast a wide vision in front of all these people, I better find a way to make it happen, or I'm gonna look, I'm gonna look like a douchebag. So I kind of would put myself out on a limb saying, here's what we're working on, here's how we're gonna change the game, and this is why, and it wasn't always perfect, but because we had brought people into our inner sanctum and shared with them the vision and shared with them the struggles, they were fully bought in. Like, some of our first customers are still our best customers. At this point, millions of customers later. So yeah, I mean, it was always part of the plan to get people to Maine. They can experience Maine, experience Origin, experience the factory, listen to the machines, walk through the factory, see and smell and touch and interact with what it means to be made in America. I remember a guy, they call him the Spaniard. He fought in the UFC. He registered for one of the camps, and he's a friend of mine now. And he walked in the factory the first time, and he was like, I didn't think I was going to have this like feeling walking in here. Like, if you've never been in a factory and you walk in and you see like people just grinding and building shit from nothing, it's a different experience, and it kind of triggers something inside of you, like, whoa, this is missing from my life, because my life is so flat behind the screen. You know what I mean? Is
Yeah.
everything's 2D, and all of a sudden you're in this 3D world, and it's surround sound, and it's like, whoa. So that type of experience just reinforces what we're doing, and creates that stickiness for the customer. Undeniable, never-ending stickiness.
Yeah, it's so beautiful, and it inspired me also. We did this our first little mini version of it. We call it Mix You. I had
Hmm.
140 young women this past summer doing an 8-week leadership course, and again, I brought like
Nice.
all my little jujitsu and your influence and different people into this, influencers and fashion designers and people to come speak and lecture to these 140 young people, and it was so rewarding, and they were so bought in, and not every single one of them connected in the way that you hope, but there's just those a dozen or so, and
Yeah.
it's a great recruiting tool also to be able to pick up talent. And
Oh
I,
yeah.
and I wonder if that's something that you've been able to do as you've built your team and you went from
Yeah.
0 to 200 something and get people bought in on the brand and maybe even in some cases move to Maine.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I just had, in the past 2 weeks, I had someone move from Georgia and someone move from South Carolina. So they both train jujitsu. One is newer to jujitsu. The other one's a purple belt. Been training for 5 or 6 years. So
Yeah.
we've got people moving to Maine all the time, that are just fully bought into what we're doing. And honestly, it's not like you think like, oh, it's all about how much someone's going to make. It's the monetary side. It's not. Like, people, like, fulfillment comes in different ways. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
folks usually take a pay cut to move to Maine, to work for Origin. We're a startup. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're the 215th fastest growing private business in America, but we're still a startup. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We still get up every morning like it's our first day, and like we need to rip people's faces off, because we've got goals, and we want to make sure that we're capitalizing on every minute, of every day, and having the right team in place that's bought into that is very important, that are working at that pace.
Yeah. Yeah. It's everything. Well, I'm incredibly grateful for your time and for being a
Yeah.
part of this book. I'm really excited to include your story in it. The American manufacturing story. It's close to my heart, being in the fashion business, and
Sure.
it's so impressive what you've done. Keep it up, and thank you so much. And please encourage your business partner to step up already and dig us out of this mess. We need him, and it sounds like we might need you too. And
Yeah.
I think we might need you two to step up, because you have the vision and the guts that so many people are lacking in this country right now. And I'm not taking this political. I promise I'm not taking it political, but I'm just telling you that what you've done is an inspiration, and it should be
Appreciate it.
It should be acknowledged.
No, thank you, man. I definitely appreciate it. Thanks for helping me spread the word and spread the story. So
Yeah,
it's greatly appreciated.
it's my pleasure.